To get started with anything animation, we need to import Animated from React Native. We had set up our state to be updated every 1 second, and our componentDidUpdate would run and log the previous value as well as the current value. Now let's set up the animation to trigger rather than just console logging. To do this, we're going to need an animated value. So let's set up a component we'll mount, and we'll say this.animation is equal to a new animated.value, and we'll set it to 0. We actually don't want this to be 0. We want to control the translate. So we want it to move up and or down. So what this will actually get passed in is the position. And so we want to set the appropriate position in the start. However, typically we wouldn't have the height in the beginning. So this actually is not necessary, but we will pass in the position of the value and the height. However, it is necessary when we have a dynamic number of ticks because the height will have already been measured, and therefore the newly rendered number will be in the correct position before the user sees it. Now we're getting an error because it expects something. So what we actually want to pass in here is this.animation. So now our value that we were passing in with position is now inside of our animated value. And now we're passing that into our translate style, which will be right here. Now, the other thing that we need to do is because we're passing animated styles into a view, we need to change this to an animated.view. So as you can see, even though we're passing in 0, 1, and 9, the default of our get position is going to be 0. So now when the component updates, we can animate to the next value. However, we don't want to animate necessarily unless the values have changed. So we'll say if this.props.value doesn't equal previous props.value, then we'll call animated.timing. Pass in our animation, so this.animation. And our to value will just be the same thing that we had here. So we'll say get position this.props.value and height, and we'll give it a duration of 500 milliseconds. And then we have to make sure that we call start or our animation won't get kicked off. So now that we have that all set up, we can add back our random interval generator, save that. We can see that it's randomly changing to all the values and animating from one to the other. This was all made possible because React Native will reuse the component if they are in the same location or if you have provided them a specific key. However, we don't need to do that because they are rendering in the exact same location. So the final rundown of how this works is we measure a single digit. That gives us the height of each element within this scrolling stack of numbers. Our additional items are hidden because our styles.row is set to overflow hidden. When React does a set state, our ticks will then be reused and we'll get the previous value and be able to calculate the new position that it needs to animate the translation to. Now there's one final improvement that we could make, and that is to use the native driver. Because we're doing just a simple translation, this allows us to use native animations that don't run on the JavaScript thread and therefore are more performant.